It is indeed a privilege to have amongst us two eminent academics who have made significant contributions to literary and cultural studies, and their contributions have been widely acknowledged. We have amongst us Professor Himadri Lahiri. Professor Lahiri retired from the Department of English and Cultural Studies, University of Burdwan in 2016. He is currently a professor of English at the School of Humanities, Netaji Subhash Open University, Kolkata. Professor Lahiri is a distinguished academic whose work spans Indian writing in English, diaspora studies, translation studies, cultural studies, and environmental humanities. His insightful scholarship has significantly enriched contemporary literary discourse. We are equally honored to have with us we are honored to welcome Professor Joyita Sengupta, head of the Department of English, Kuch Bihar Panchanan Barma University, and also the president of Sisure Collective Society. Professor Sengupta is a distinguished academic of international repute, a versatile professor who, like our principal sir said, wears many hats as a translator, critic, painter. Her research interests encompass translation studies, comparative literature, gender studies, and cultural studies. Through her academic leadership and scholarship, she has made substantial contributions to contemporary literary and interdisciplinary research. Before we proceed further, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend our sincere gratitude to our respected principal, sir, Dr. Pankaj Kumar Devnath, whose constant encouragement and unwavering support has made programs like this possible. His vision of creating a academic atmosphere in this college has continually inspired the Department of English to organize such seminars, workshops, conferences, which critically engage intellectual discussions and foster academic engagement. Sir, we are deeply grateful for your constant support and guidance. Talking of today's lecture on Cli-fi as a new genre of fiction writing, first things first, for the uninitiated, Cli-fi stands for climate fiction. So this 20th century, we see or we can sense that in this 20th century has increasingly become the century of cultural anxiety. So let me correct, or we can also say that it has become a century of climate anxiety. So the challenges, hello, yes. So as I was saying, that this 21st century, we can sense that this 21st century has become increasingly the century of climate anxiety. The various problems, the challenges which are posed by climate changes, biodiversity degradation, environmental degradation, the rising sea levels, global climate change, the receding glaciers. These have compelled the writers, scholars, and artists to rethink the relationship between human beings and the natural environment. So, within this context, literature too has evolved new ways of reimagining reimagining the new ways of narrating this ecological crisis and environmental history. It is within this context that climate fiction or Cli-fi, it has emerged as one of the significant literary developments of the recent decades. Although we have seen many stories uh, which imagined the climate climate catastrophe, those stories already appeared in earlier in science fiction and speculative fiction. But this term, cli-fi, it was popularized by a well-known American journalist and climate activist, Dan Bloom, in the recent, sorry, we can say in the early 2010s. And since then, this term has come to represent a wide range of literary works that engage with climate change and its social, political, uh, and also emotional consequences. We have to keep it in mind that cli-fi is not just merely about environmental disasters. It encourages us to think about questions of sustainability, environmental justice, capitalism, technology, migration, ethics, and humanity's place within the larger sociological web. So it asks difficult questions about responsibility and survival while imagining both dystopian futures and possibilities for ecological renewal. When we come to our own literature, that is our Indian literature, we can see that Indian literature too has made significant strides towards this growing field, towards this growing genre. Writers such as Amitabh Ghosh, through Gun Island and The Hungry Tide, they have foregrounded the intersections of climate change, migration, memory, and environmental history. His influential work of nonfiction, which I'm sure Professor Joyita Sengupta will talk about it, that is The Great Derangement, has also challenged writers and readers alike to rethink the place of climate change within literature. Similarly, Kunal Basu's The Thief Who Pulled and Troubled Bread, then Anil Menon's speculative fiction, Manjula Padmanabhan's futuristic narratives, Vandana Singh's science fiction, and regional literatures dealing with floods, rivers, forests, and environmental displacement have expanded the contours of Indian cli-fi. These works remind us that climate change is not merely a scientific or environmental issue. It also deals, it is also deeply connected to the cultural, political, historical, at which it is also profoundly human. So today's discussion, therefore, could not be more timely and relevant as climate change increasingly shapes our lived realities. It also reshapes our literary imagination. How does within this juncture at this juncture there are several important questions which needs to be addressed. Questions such as how does literature respond to ecological crisis? Can fiction inspire environmental consciousness? Is cli-fi simply an extension of science fiction, or has it evolved into a distinct literary genre with its own aesthetics, ethics, and politics? So these are some of the fascinating questions that we hope to address, that we hope to explore in this afternoon. So to begin our discussion, I would like to invite Professor Joyita Sengupta to share her perspectives on Cli-fi, particularly on the literary, cultural, and the interdisciplinary dimensions of Cli-fi. So, madam, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Robozopi. Um, it gives me immense pleasure once again to be here in Kuch Bihar College because Kuch Bihar College has been a kind of a home for Sizuri Collective Society, and many of the teachers over here are also members of Sizuri Collective Society. Like Prabhajati Dutta, for example, is the Assistant Secretary of Sizuri Collective Society, and Professor Himati Lahiri is one of the the GB members of Sizuri Collective Society, and we also have Paulo, we have Krishanato, we have um, I think most of the English, professors over here have been collaborating with us, and we have had two wonderful conferences. And thanks to you, Dr. Pankaj Devna, Pankaj Dam, for making it possible. So these are going to be some memories that we are going to cherish. So today, once again, it just took Paulo about 3 or 4 days to organize this event, and Pankaj never says no. And just now, I was just whispering into his ear, do you want a conference, a short conference on Rishi Aurobindo? And he said, is it possible? I said, of course, we will do it. Okay, so this is my relationship with Dr. Pankaj Devnar and with the English department of this particular college. We have worked together and we will be working together. And Rokujaki, it was a wonderful introduction to climate fiction, Cli-fi, as we you call it these days, the short form, because we're used to short forms these days, right? And for the students over here, the first semester students, you have a Hungry Tide in your syllabus. And later on, I think in PG, now if you do the 4 years thing, you have also done Island and Shadow Lines, I guess. Okay. So the details about Amitabh Ghosh as a writer is up to Professor Madrid Lairi to comment on, talk about, and introduce you to the writer, uh, one of uh, the most read writers today, if I should say, from India, right? So before I begin, you must have seen Shadow Lines. You must have also seen Hungry Tide. If not read it properly, I would also ask you to read uh, Amitabh Ghosh's Jungle Dama and Amitabh Ghosh's The Living Mountains. So these two books are, it will hardly take you one night to read because this is going to make you get interested in what he's writing about and what exactly Cli-fi is all about. And we are in the sub Himalayas. So the living mountain, though he doesn't mention the Himalayas over here, is actually what he's writing about, the Himalayan terrain and what is happening there. And it is in a storytelling techniques. So that is going to make you more interested. Life as a genre is not only talking about environmental spaces, but also talking about the new literary genre. That's the note in which Prabhupada ended. That whether it is an extension of fantasy fiction and dystopia and science fiction and so on and so forth. In fact, this new literary genre uses all these aesthetics of dystopia, science fiction, fantasy, myth together to form a new genre. And this is something that Amitabh Ghosh is talking about in The Great Derangement, where you have three sections where he's talking about the stories, the art of storytelling. And he's talking about the history, how history plays a very important role in bringing about the environmental change. Okay, so the history of the environmental history of different parts of the world. And he's talking about the colonial intervention, which has played a major role in bringing about climate change in certain portions of the world. Okay, so if we are going to theorize what Cli-fi is all about, then I could say that this Cli-fi writing, though it was not named Cli-fi, actually begins with Jules Verne in 1889, The Purchase of the North Pole. This is a novel which talks about climate change due to the tilting of the Earth's axis. Now, after that, we have had many writers like Lawrence Manning and Asimov and also Margaret Atwood, who have, referred to the environmental change that is taking place because of the role of the Anthropocene, means like how man is responsible for bringing about this climate change, okay, industrialization, um, wars, okay, pollution, and things like that. How that is responsible for bringing about the change in the climatic conditions. Okay, uh, like say for example, Lawrence Manning's book in 1933, The Man Who Awoke, uses the term the wasters. You know, it's a futuristic fiction which talks about the people in the 20th century as wasters who have actually depleted the environmental reserves and uh, has wreaked ruin on Mother Earth. So, once again, the role of the Anthropocene. In this connection, if we really have to go back to the past, Dr. Pankaj Dednath has been referring to Central government's role in doing, various activities with the students as such, and there is a thrust on the IKS, Indian Knowledge Systems, right? So when we talk about Indian knowledge systems is not only about the Vedas and Upanishads. It is also about the indigenous knowledge systems, which is not really given much importance to. So even if you go to the Vedas and Upanishads, like say for example, if you read Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, you find that it talks about creation, it talks about paying homage to nature, okay, all the elements in nature. And if you come to indigenous knowledge systems, you find that the different customs, codes, belief systems in the hills here in Kuch Bihar also, like say for example, this is the month of Shravan, so you have Shiv Bhakts, paying homage to Shiva. Once again, it's worshipping nature so that the nature is in control because nature is paraprakriti. It is either Shiva or it is Kali, whatever. And then you have the Manasha puja in the offing few days from now. So once again, why do you pay homage to nature? Because you want nature to be design. Okay, so that it doesn't create havoc because you know that there have been flash floods. You know there have been floods going on in Assam, for example. Right. So the customs, codes, and beliefs of a particular society are important. I'll give you another example. Say, for example, if you go to in the Himalayan terrain, specifically places like Sikkim and so on, you find that they take great care of the water body. They will not allow you to defile the water body, okay, because that all water bodies are considered to be sacred. And so if you defile the water body, then the goddess who is there, or the snake goddess who is there, or the water goddess who is there is going to curse you. So create fear in the minds of the people. Why? So that they refrain from doing anything which is going to defile the water body. Okay, so there is some kind of a logic which is there in order to refrain people from doing activities which will be detrimental for nature. So there is a logic for these custom codes, and there is a scientific logic, behind these custom codes and belief systems, right? So coming to Amitabh Ghosh's, the Great Derangement, Climate Change, and Unthinkable, that is it came out in 2016. He says that if certain literary forms are unable to negotiate these waters, then they will have failed, and their failures will have to be counted as an aspect of the broader imaginative and cultural failure that lies at the heart of climate crisis. Okay, so this is kind of countered by Mark Bold, who says that art and literature of one time is pregnant with of our time is pregnant with catastrophe, with weather and water, wildness and weirdness. Okay, fine. It is so, but does it have a proper literary form? No. So Amita Ghosh, Great Derangement, talks about the need for a new literary form, a new genre. Okay, and you find that this proper theorization happens a little later, though it is wild fictions, where he was talking about his various writings, and also his lectures are included in this volume. In the first two chapters, he is talking about the need for a new literary form, and he talks about migration as one of the factors which are wrapped up with the idea of Cli-fi fiction. But he says that migration is not just one factor, which is related to Cli-fi. There are many other historical factors, political factors, etc., which are there. And when he's talking about migration, he's not talking about only human migration. Like, say, for example, a certain area in Bay of Bengal. Okay, the bay stretches into the ocean. And so the countries, in South Asia, like Thailand, Malaysia, etc., they are also affected if something happens in the bay. So in the bay, something about, he says, 60,000 square kilometer, there is a dead zone, which means like there is no oxygen in this area. So marine animals, cannot survive. So only, oxidizing bacteria and marine worms, very few creatures can survive in that particular zone. So if there is no fish, if the marine creatures vanish from the Bay of Bengal, what happens to the livelihood of the people whose families are based, whose sustenance is based on fishery? Okay, so this is how migration. So is an important factor. Migration of the marine animals, marine creatures, which is related to the migration of people as well. If you don't get food, then why should you stay there? You migrate to a better place where you have food, shelter, and clothing. So he takes on migration as an important factor related to Cli-fi. And in the second chapter, he's talking about Sundarban. So if you have read Hungry Tide, you know that he talks about the Morichapi. And he also talks about the customs, codes, and beliefs of the people, indigenous people in the Sundarbans, like Bone Bibi, the worship of the Bone Bibi, and things like that. So here again, he takes up, the governmental policy, the left front government's policy of evicting, people, majorly the indigenous people of the land, because they wanted to build the tiger reserve. But ironically so, they a few years later thought about this Sahara project where there'll be, a floating, a restaurant and things like that in order to make it a tourist hub. So this is the irony, okay? And we know that we know about the killings in Morichapi, which he severely criticizes in the Hungry Tide, okay? And he takes it up again in the wild fictions. This is in the second chapter. Now, I've been talking about Amita Ghosh, but there is another writer whom you do not know. Um, though he is also quite famous. His name is Roger Chaudhary. So, Roger Chaudhary began writing, in the year 2013, means his first novel was published in 2013, which was Hotel Calcutta, and then it was followed by Amber Dusk in 2000s, right, soon after. And then in 2018, he brings out Butterfly Effect, Spellcaster in 2023, and then Solar Plant Creatures, which follow later. He switches over to Cli-fi writing. Now, very recently, from Missouri Collective Society, we have launched his book. This is the book, The Climate Crossroads, and I would also ask the audience to theorize Cli-fi. Okay, so he has very neatly, it's brought out by Bloomsbury, very neatly, try to shape the theory of Cli-fi, how to read Cli-fi. So over here, he talks about three features which we should consider when we are reading or critiquing a Cli-fi. So first he says the planetary connection. The first point is planetary connection. So whatever is happening here, say in the Himalayas or sub-Himalayas of Kuch Bihar and Alipurdwar, what planetary connections, what effect does it have on the world at large? Which means like the local features, okay, how the economy is affected, how people in general, how trade, commerce are being affected by what happens here. Supposing there is a flood over here and the crops are destroyed. Okay, how does it affect the economy of the place and how it has a large scale effect on the world, India and the world at large? So, the planetary connection. And the second, he talks about the history. Okay, how history has affected, which Amita Ghosh also has talked about in the Great Arrangement. So, what are the historical changes which are responsible, for bringing about, climate changes. Okay. So the colonial impact that is there. Uh, and the third is the government policy that he talks about, the projects like dams, deforestation and things like that. How these have affected climate change. So, whenever we are reading any Cli-fi, we have to consider these three factors, and then we can come to a resolution. These are the factors how the climate has responded to, and why we are suffering now. Okay, so I think with this I have to stop. I leave it to you. When you read The Hungry Tide, or when you read The Gun Island specifically, Gun Island, it begins with Sundarbans, and then how it is connected with to Venice. So once again, that planetary connection is there if you read Gun Island. So you see that is reflected over there. And he's also talking about the Irrawaddy dolphins. So he mentions that also in the wild fiction. Like the Sundarban area is the area which has been very rich for the whales and the Irrawaddy dolphins. But because of what has been happening, because of the government policies and things like that, they totally vanished. And if you recall, during the COVID times, we did have the dolphins coming back to the Ganges itself. Why? Because people were staying back in the holes, they were not plundering the waters. Okay. And very recently, you had a protest movement in the Broadway, which in Uttarkashi, it is the Broadway of the it's called the Bhaniwala Rishikesh Highway. So they were cutting down trees because they wanted to broaden the highway because of the traffic jam. But the people, they clung to the tree, saying that our goddess, the tree goddess, lives here. We cannot possibly do this. And the government had to stop the felling of the trees. And this is Uttarakhand, if you remember, is also the place where Chipko movement began. And Chipko, though it is connected with the protest against deforestation, it has expanded to include any kind of protest which would stop the plundering of the natural reserves of our country. Okay, and there is another protest which is going on, that is the Ken Batwa River Linkage Project in MP, Chhatarpur, where once again you have the tribal people. They are just lying on the river. Okay, they have tied themselves to the cross in protest that don't do this to us. If you do this, how do we survive? Where do we live? Our homes, what happens to that? What is our sustenance? Right? So these protests are extremely important in order to stop this, environmental damage. Lastly, I'd like to end with the Buddhist concept of deep ecology and shallow ecology. Okay, deep ecology is something that talks about the connection with nature, man's connection with nature. So the concept is Buddhist, but it is also Vedic, it's also Upanishadic, because man was always connected with nature in the past. If you go back to the myths, the trees could talk. Okay, and if you want to come to English literature or European literature, in Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, the trees could talk, the stones could speak, on inanimate beings to speak. So that is the connection with even, our epics like Mahabharata. Because who is the witness to the Kurukshetra? The mountain. Who speaks in the end, right? So everything has life. We cannot say that only the humans are important. Every particle, every living creature, every inanimate object in this world has life. Okay, so this is the ancient concept in all cultures. And if we should adhere to that, we should know how to respect, nature, right? So that is the deep ecology. And shallow ecology is building of dams, progress in the name of modernization, which is causing the flash floods in North Bengal, in Sikkim, and which has also created a flash flood in Uttarakhand around about this time, Uttarkashi, around about this time last year. If you remember, cloudburst. We also had a cloudburst in Kolkata, if you remember. So all these things will keep on happening unless we are cautious, we are responsible. So herein comes the last point that Roger Chaudhary talks about is justice, ethics. So personal ethics is important, very important, not only the governmental ethics and the idea of justice, but personal ethics is important that each of us, we have the responsibility to preserve nature. We should not only rely on the government. So with this, I close my say. Over to Himatida.